Hello and welcome to this month's coffee break. My name is Andrew Miller, your host, lead principal technologist at Pure. I'm joined by Ratinder. Ratinder, thanks so much for jumping in the boat with me today, being here. We'll get to your background and more in just a minute. As you can see from the title, we are here to continue the theme of security, but in a little bit of a different way. The goal here, candidly, is always to be educational in various ways, explore what Pure does in the space. This is actually going to be more educational than not. How do you build security in from day one? We're going to wander into that because DevSecOps is not just a term, there's a pervasive impact. As always, this is a series, the Coffee Break series. Thank you so much for joining us each month. If you have not been able to attend previous ones, we cover so many different topics. Always make sure to have this in so that you can go back and look at it from a follow-up standpoint. All the recordings are available online. And frankly, they age a little bit better from a solution standpoint. You can find us at purestorage.com/events and find previous episodes as well. Practically speaking, I recognize that some of the appeal, some of the goal of joining is for there is a $10 gift card for the first 1,000 attendees. Within the next week, you'll receive that from Olivia at Pure Storage, and we will call it the drawing for the Ember 12-ounce travel mug at the end. There are various folks you join. We really appreciate you joining, but if you fit in these categories, we can't send you gift cards for reasons that I think you understand. My name is Andrew Miller, your host as always. And what I try not to do is reintroduce myself every month because that would be pretty redundant, but more about for this category, I think about when I first was working with developers inside as a customer and actually talking with some of the web developers about some of the things that they were having to deal with from a spoofing standpoint, fuzzing. This is even like SQLs type stuff. This is the days of PHP and web apps, et cetera. So this isn't necessarily what we're going to talk about, but I've had some sense of development security for a while, or security for developers. Now, the reason that we have Ratinder joining is because you know so much more about this. Ratinder, we're going to wander through your background more in section one, but do you mind briefly kind of going through and chatting a little bit about what you do about Pure and your overall background before we go deeper later?
Certainly. So first of all, thank you, everyone. I see almost 1,000 participants, so this is amazing. Obviously, Andrew, you do an amazing job of getting the message out and attracting such a large audience. So thank you again so much for having me here. So I'm Ratinder, CTO for Security and Networking Technologies at Pure Storage. I also lead our Gen AI effort, which is another topic perhaps for another day. Got into Pure because I had recently, back in 2021, sold my company to Fortinet, and I was hanging around doing research, and Charlie Giancarlo, our CEO, calls me up, and I've known him for 30 years. He's been involved in every startup that I've worked. I used to work for him back in 91 timeframe, so a long-time fan of Charlie. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Researching." He said, "Well, come in here and help us build a security program for our products." So this was something new and different, and I knew absolutely nothing about storage. And I would say I still know very little about storage. I'm learning every day, but so it was an interesting challenge. So I decided to join Pure, and it's been a rewarding journey so far. So as you can see, I've done a number of startups. I've been a startup guy ever since I finished school. My last few startups have been in cloud security, which was ShieldX, data loss prevention. I'm one of the pioneers in the DLP space, acquired by McAfee. Did high-speed, because this is at that time, multi-gigabit was high. Now, we're getting terabit switching, but build a completely in-hardware system to do server load balancing type applications, doing application level switching. And that was acquired with Extreme Networks. And then the very first company that I started was a direct application of my doctoral thesis on connecting different protocols together. In this case, was getting IPX and NetWare IPX applications onto the internet. So a while back. So over these years, it's been fun. I've had a chance to innovate and work with many very innovative team members that many of them have worked with me through all these startups. In fact, the chief scientist of my previous company was my undergrad research assistant at Iowa State. So some of these relationships go way back. I got my doctorate in computer engineering from Ames, Iowa State University, Ames, Iowa. And my other work is all around Taekwondo and Qigong and esoteric practices of that nature. And I've done that since I was in high school. So I have a 6-degree black belt in Taekwondo. I teach at a school near here in the Bay Area. So that's a little background for me.
And while we were actually getting ready, just a little bit ago, I asked you like, "Hey, how long ago was that picture? Are you still that flexible?" We're like, "Yeah, I'm still that flexible," kind of thing. So I was like, "Oh, good for you."
Absolutely.
Okay. Last little thank you. Last little bit how that's actually more just a pause because we're going to continue to explore some of the background. Make sure to join us next month for when evergreen dreams meet migration realities, both professional services in general, and some of the idea of, even if going to Pure is your last migration, you have to navigate through, or there's even just a lot of good principles. So this is going to be a very practical session with some of the folks that are in our professional services organization. We had them on about a year and a half ago. And I can't get away from mentioning this is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we are here right now, but there's still a flash crew to come. There's still another event, which we would call our Engage events, where we talk about a topic, and then we have, in this case, Butch Harmon, a legendary professional golf coach. To be honest, it's not like I know Butch very well, but I've been told he's really good and he knows his stuff, and I'm sure that Google would prove me right. Without further ado, let's dive into this month. As always, a little bit of a lightweight agenda, and having a little bit of fun as DevSecOps. Is it just DevOps plus security? Is it just because, hey, there's new rounds of startups and they need funding? Obviously not at Pure, because we haven't been a startup for a little while. Maybe it's something more. So first, we're going to continue in exploring actually some of your background, Tinder, some kind of career lessons and inflection points, because it's pretty fascinating to see the list of startups there. Then some general definition of what is DevSecOps actually. Moving into how we're doing it at Pure, there's a 6-point framework there. And last but not least, a bonus item kind of around physical supply chain security, because sometimes when people are asking about building secure products, sometimes it's about the software side of it. That's critical. But the physical side, well, that matters too. And as always, we have folks to help out with the Q&A. That's Jason and Sean and Roger and Olivia this month. Please feel free to put items in the chat. We'll kind of try and keep an eye on them, but make sure to put questions into the Q&A too. Before we dive in, Olivia, do you mind launching the first poll here? And so this is going to inform some of our questions a little bit later. Do you have software developers on staff? I know that can vary. And what % of your applications are developed in-house? Because that, frankly, it will affect how relevant some of this discussion is for you at an internal level versus maybe at a level of how you're evaluating products you choose to purchase. So section 1, in case anyone's hoping for slides, hey, there's no slides for this section. It's really just talking about a little bit more of your background, Ratinder. I think the first thing that almost kind of jumped out at me is you've been through a bunch of startups. I was at one myself. It was a crazy ride. For me, it was 200 to 1,300 in 2 years, and I enjoyed it. I'm enjoying Pure now at a different kind of phase of maturity. But why 5 startups? What kept you going back to the startup well, if you will?
Certainly. So, the title which says from startups to patents to Taekwondo, I would sort of turn it around, and I would say it's martial arts to startups to various other outcomes, and we would say, well, how's that even possible? What's even the connection between working out and what you do? So I'm an ardent student of Sun Tzu, and I have a strategy session that I normally hold called Lessons from 2,500 years ago. And those lessons sort of state that change is the only constant. We all understand that. But with change comes opportunity. So change will affect the marketplace, which is think about the marketplace as a collection of people with similar needs. And as change occurs, they get affected. And many times change will wipe out, what is no longer relevant, but at the same time, bring around something that will have legs for the next upcoming years. So as per Sun Tzu, true wisdom lies in understanding the impact of change on the ground. So he would, of course, use very flowery language, heaven and earth, and concepts like that, and translated to, and it was really encoded. Even in those days, it was cryptographically encoded, so the average person would think this is poetry, but the strategists would understand, what the core message is. So true wisdom lies in understanding, having the vision of seeing that seeing the change, having knowledge of a marketplace to understand the impact, and this intersection of vision and knowledge then has to lead to action. There are many that can pontificate saying, yeah, supercomputing is coming, or quantum computing is coming, or AI is going to get better, and there are no shortage of people that can pontificate and sort of talk about what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But as per Sun Tzu, true greatness lies in the philosopher and the executioner in one person, and the ability to put together a set of actions, putting together a core unit of a team that can actually execute on those actions, and then positioning. So you have to position in the marketplace to see if what you're building or your campaign is going to be successful or not. And the lessons say, yes, that failure is absolute. It will happen, and you have to have the resources to iterate on it. So he was talking agility 2,500 years ago. So these, as I understood some of these concepts, and then I read various translations of that piece of work, and it led to me getting an understanding, saying, how do you see change, and how do you find its impact on the appropriate marketplace? And that marketplace has to be close to what you are able to do. So literally speaking, if something's happening in a space, for example, quantum computing, it's far away from my expertise. So yes, I know it will dramatically shift, but I can't do anything about it. I don't have the skill set or the resources to do it. Others will. So that's your challenge. You kind of take your capability, and this is what Sun Tzu called the cost of the campaign. How much effort and energy would you spend to take advantage of an opportunity? And that equation has to be solved. So this is what then led me to understand, to kind of analyze changes. My first startup, which was, and some of you might still remember those days when Mosaic had first come out, the first internet
web browser
had come out.
Yeah.
And people wanted to run internet applications, TCP applications on all types of networks. And Mobile Network was the predominant business network in those days. So it just happened to be my doctoral dissertation was in that space, and I was able to connect, that change that has happened and the enterprise corporate networks, and build a solution, and Cisco acquired that one. So each of those 5 startups that I've done was analyzing the change that has happened and its impact, and then putting together the execution and positioning to see the outcomes.
I mean, it was pretty fascinating, and I think I may summarize a little bit here, and then I want you to give some comments before we kind of wrap up here. But you looked at both the intersection of networking speeds, 100 meg to gig to 10 gig. That was, if a round robin DNS isn't good enough, so load balancing. Then you're looking at security impact, then network security, then Gen AI, which is just a fascinating run. Actually, I'll just turn it back over to you if there's anything you want to call out from any kind of lessons learned along the way from any of those startups.
Yes. So, to do startups, you have to be an optimistic person. And sometimes I'm overly optimistic on the amount of energy it would take, time, material, money, people to achieve something. And so I would tell my other team members, saying, whatever I say, double it, because I'm going to be extremely optimistic, and the reality is somewhere away. And
you need that. You need someone to balance you, but you need someone like that on the team.
Yes, or balance, or realize what you're doing, help the self-realization, saying, I think it's 3 months of work, but real life happens, and it's probably 6 to 9 months of work. So break that in. Now Gen AI changes all of that, because that is your assistant that will give you that feedback once you describe what you're trying to do.
And some of this, Tim, even go back to your open commentary, it made me think of the I don't know if it's from Steve Jobs, but I associate with him the quote of great artists ship. Eventually you have to get out of analysis mode and do stuff. And then even for me, and maybe this applies to folks listening, like early in my career, I realized that there were kind of 2 dynamics. Like IT is always changing, like you said, the world, but IT especially. And either I can be the one driving change, or I can have it driven on me. And I'm not here to mess up anyone's life or career, but if those are my 2 options, I know which side of that equation I'd rather be on. I'd rather be the one thinking about it, understanding it, driving it. Maybe last question for this part is we were chatting a little bit about maybe the hardest. I was asking actually, but what's the hardest thing you've done? And it wasn't even in the startup category. Just to me, this is just interesting at a human level, if you don't mind.
Yes. Yeah. So you could imagine startup after startup after startup, and the toll it may take. But that was just the fun part. And the real challenges were And earlier I had a background that we were showing, and we took it off because it's our reading to do. But so to supplement all those things, I also study something called qigong, which is a methodology to improve your energy and how your core systems work. So many of these esoteric practices are designed. I'm talking over 5,000 years. These practices are designed to improve your endocrine system, so your key glands and internal systems, and also to improve your skeletal structure and the skeletal muscles. So qigong incorporates many of these methodologies, and there are two practices in there that were extremely challenging. So the first one is called these standing meditations. So these are adaptations of Indian Hatha Yoga, and these practices require you to stand in a certain position for extended durations of time. I'm talking 2 hours. So there's a certain posture called the horse stance. And many of you who probably have studied martial arts, it's a common posture. And you're basically standing with the knees slightly bent, and that's fine, and your arms at a certain position. But when you do that for extended periods of time, so my test was to get to 2 hours. So my Qigong master said, you got to get to 2 hours if you want to get anywhere. And I said, oh, I don't understand what the big deal is. I've been doing martial arts and weight training and running and yoga and jogging for so many years. I should be able to do it. So I could do 3 minutes. And then they said, oh, this is gravity and stillness are hard to overcome. So stillness of the body, stillness of the breath, and stillness, more importantly, of the mind, because your mind gives up long before your system will. So these practices then essentially helped me find this focus, which lets you isolate yourself, both mentally and physically, from what's going on. And finally, after 3 years of practice, I got to 2 hours of standing, and that was my first test. Then, so following the same practice, my Qigong master, and I call him my real life Yoda, the true master of the life force. Then he said, well, the next thing we have to do is you have to understand how the endocrine system works in the body. And I said, well, what do you mean? So it turns out there are 3 master glands in the brain, the pituitary, the thymus, and the hypothalamus. And they control the growth hormone in the body and many, many functions. And over time, so by the time you're 25, the pituitary gland says, okay, we've done enough growth hormone production, you're on your own now, and it shuts down. And hence decay and aging begins. So you're not healing fast enough, and so forth. And other imbalances come in. So there's a practice called the dark room meditation, where I actually stay in darkness for, again, extended period of time. This case was 2 weeks. And the whole idea is that once you cut off light, and this is theory, and you can research it and see if it applies.
This is not medical advice. This is just interesting stuff. Keep going.
Yeah. So you cut off light, and the pituitary gland is sort of behind the olfactory nerve. So there's no stimulation going on, and you're also in a still environment. So there's after the 3rd day, you've thought through everything, the stock market crash and all the bugs that you introduced in the code, and nothing, and you're done with all the thinking and rethinking, and there is stillness. And that is supposed to reignite the 3 master glands to get the body to heal. So to stay in that situation for 2 weeks, and luckily there's a school in Chiang Mai up in the mountains of Thailand that specializes in this practice, and you have a nice environment to do the same. So that I thought was a challenging thing.
Startups are relatively easier.
Yes.
It actually reminds me a little bit of I actually worked with some folks, and one person reported to me that actually had a military background, and we were in a really stressful set of meetings and conversations, and I checked in with him afterwards, and it was like, hey, it was like, yeah, I'm good, no one's shooting at me, this is fine. And I was like, so it's like comparison, kind of thing. So if you've done that for him, it's like, so I can actually say it helps navigate through what can be stressful in startups, but relative. Okay, if you were coming to this for tech, we are wandering back there, but just like we're all humans, and that's part of the point of Coffee Break, we can explore things a little bit different outside. So I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Ratinder. I'm going to end the first poll here, and I will share the results. There we go. So 84% of folks here attending today do have software developers on staff. Great. That actually helps inform our conversation as we go along a little bit. And there's a healthy range here of at least half the audience has 10% or more, maybe more than a quarter, 20. So there's a healthy range of folks who have in-house developed applications. To be honest, where I've worked personally, it was on the lower side. So I'm really fascinated to see this breakdown. That's why sometimes we do the polls for fun, but we also do it for legitimate reasons too. Okay, so I will stop sharing that one. And Olivia, if you don't mind launching poll 2 here. And there we go. So poll 2. So have you implemented DevOps? Maybe that's the Phoenix project, et cetera. And before today, have you looked at DevSecOps for internal use at all? Which cues us into diving into, what is DevSecOps actually, right? Is it, just giving the keys to developers, having a little bit of fun? Now, this is a security topic, but security is this huge continuum, defense in depth, all these phrases we like to throw around, right? So last month, we're exploring security almost from an external perspective, with Hector on and how are attackers trying to get in and what are they doing. In the past, actually, we've explored some pure security features. That was actually almost 2 years ago now with Nick Saki, all the different security features that Nick has. That Pure has, and Nick was describing. And I'm sure Nick's very personally secure too, But from a DevSecOps standpoint, do you mind, Ratinder, just kind of helping define a little bit of where DevSecOps came from and why? And if you're wondering, these are actually some internal slides we use. They're polished up to not look unprofessional, but at the same time, this is not necessarily marketing content. This is actually what we use internally sometimes to describe. So if you don't mind a little bit of background on DevSecOps and what it really is.
Certainly. So many of the attendees that are here are probably large enterprise. They run in large enterprises. And again, the number of breaches every year has gone up, right? So that Verizon publishes the breach report every year, and it's just fascinating to watch things just keep going up and up and up. And many of those come from weaknesses in the systems that they deploy. There's a combination of systems that they deploy and the practices to secure the system that they deploy, right? So weaknesses in those two things cause these breaches to happen. So while the enterprises can definitely fix and improve their own security envelopes, but the products that they're using have to have a better security posture as well. And this then led to this push from the consumer, the enterprise customers saying, give me assurances that what you're giving me has a certain security profile. And how will you do that? And there's a number of, you do pen testing, you do all kinds of lab testing, assurances, and so forth. But those kind of find things at the tail end of, let's see, ship something, and now you did a pen test, and now you have a problem. So DevSecOps. So you can see the reason for change is we want to continuously improve the security posture of our products. Right? It's not a one-shot, one-time and done deal. This is a never-ending process. It is being driven because our customers demand, they have a higher security awareness, and there are stricter reporting guidelines coming. So a lot of regulations that put our customers in a hard spot if something goes wrong. So, the desire is to have products that have improved security posture, and we want to do that now with a strategy called Shift Left. That means it's not later, it's day -1. So that's when you start thinking about building security. And to achieve this, so many of you, were attendees today, probably have seen 1,000-page PDFs from NIST and, number of standards out there that will tell you the theory, the philosophy behind building secure products. There's secure software development, guidelines, and no shortage of documentation out there on what to achieve. But the challenge is
almost too much,
yes.
maybe.
So challenge is now we have a number of products. I think I don't know. Besides the appliances, all the combined everything, I think there's like 20 products that we ship across 2,000 engineers, different business units, different development tools, different design guidelines, right? So it's diverse, and we're not we're big, but not very big. So if imagine a large producer of enterprise products, this challenge becomes incredibly hard. So the tactic is when I presented this was we will simplify this. We will demystify the vernacular of security to something that the developers can totally absorb. So it's not a foreign topic, and it's not that security guy. It would become, this is our process. That's the goal that we were trying to get to,
Yep.
and that is the strategy of shift left and demystifying the vernacular of security. Every field, networking has jargon, right? If many of you have probably been at Cisco, and they started this whole their CLI, and people were really, you could talk, they're really into it, right? Storage has a vernacular, IOPS, and whatever else, right? And similarly, security has a jargon, has a vernacular, and these vernaculars serve the purpose of the experts, but they are orthogonal to somebody that's not in that space.
Inhibit adoption beyond the expert class. Yeah.
So that's the whole methodology that we will talk about, and how we took esoteric concepts of people that don't practice security and turn them into a process that is just part of their natural life as a developer.
I think, and some of this, your 6-point plan, we're going to, for those saying, oh, it's a 6-point plan, we'll get there in just a second. We actually tried to intentionally separate this a little bit of general industry perspective of what we're doing at Pure. I think the other side from an industry standpoint is do you mind actually just discussing a little bit about a general approach to secure software development lifecycle? Say that 5 times fast, 10 times fast. I don't know. So there's various phases here, and folks can read this. What would you highlight here in thinking about it?
Certainly. So the typical software development lifecycle, so forget security for a minute. The typical software development lifecycle would say, give me requirements, and I'll go do a design, and then I'll write some code, and we'll test it, and we'll release it, right? So that's and we'll have documentation and all those things along the way. So that's the typical software development lifecycle. And security says, we're going to expand this in the next couple of slides, where we go through each step and say what tools and technologies have to come in to make it a secure software development lifecycle. So what that means is, when you're doing designs and putting together requirements, you are specifying security needs upfront, and your designs are done in a hardened way. So there's a methodology called threat modeling, where you are analyzing the design with the security lens, so which is happening very early. So this is, to many designers, architects, this is a foreign concept. Say, yeah, I don't have that language. I'm a storage guy, or I'm a networking guy.
How would I do that?
Web apps.
Yeah.
What do you mean I have to now do threat modeling? I have no idea what a threat model is. So we want to introduce that, and we'll talk about how we achieve that. And then as you're writing your code, that has to go through continuous scanning to ensure that you did not introduce defects and vulnerabilities as part of coding practices. So there's countless ways you can do it. So we want some automation there. So scanning tools come in, and then you want to test it again with the security in mind. So you're scanning your finished product, you're doing active scans, you're doing pen testing, and all of that is happening on a continuous basis, so that and even after you release, you continue to do those types of activities to make sure that it is still resilient, because you're applying patches, you're doing code updates. So this is the continuum. And in theory, the most of the standards sort of stop here and say, this is what thou shalt do. And now it's up to you to figure out what exactly does
what goes in below each one of those bullets almost. Yeah. So I think thank you. So I'm hoping, actually, if you are working with developers and internally, because I think 84%, so we have attendees today, you have developers internally. Maybe this gives you even a little bit of a sense of what they're looking at, or maybe depending on your role, you might actually be asking them, not in a pushy way, but in an intelligent question. Hey, I'm curious, what do we do for penetration testing, or even threat modeling as far as at the front end? Mm-hmm. Just because when I saw this and we were talking about this, it actually reminded me of one comic that I'd seen a while back. I'm going to give credit here to XKCD for those of you who watch it. Yes, there is a lot of text here, so I'm going to summarize. Someone who wanted to build a wall display, they realized instead of coding it in software, it would actually be easier just to glue 2 iPhones together, buy them on eBay, glue them together. And the critique is, you just learn to glue something together you don't understand, which at times, I'm not a developer, but I've definitely done that from a scripting standpoint. And there's sites like Stack Overflow. And so sometimes that's what developers are doing too, right? Let's be real. Not insulting anybody here, hopefully. Okay. Let's actually, I think I will go ahead and before we start into poll 3. So thank you, Rutinder, for the overview walkthrough of DevSecOps, secure lifecycle development in general. I'm going to end poll number 2 and I will share it back here. There we go. So have you implemented DevSecOps? Actually, so at least partly, and I'm always kind of like, do I write the questions of like, is it like you absolutely did it or not? But so a good set. Some have tried, it didn't work out. So that's fascinating. Some didn't try. And a majority of people here have looked at this at least for internal use. So that is great to hear. Olivia, if you don't mind launching poll number 3, then we'll keep going in. So does your company look at a vendor's use of DevSecOps when evaluating products and evaluating vendors? How important is their approach to secure software development? And I was just trying to be on that one. I was trying to be very realistic because we can all say security is the most important thing, but let's also recognize that when there's product evaluation matrices, where does it actually really realistically fall in there, kind of thing. So just being practical. We'll leave that up for a little bit. So section number 3, as always, keeping it moving. So how is Pure doing this? How are we implementing? So you mentioned in coming to Pure, not as much of a storage background. You've been in IT, there was network and there were security pieces there. And even there's this thousands of pages and all these different things to do. So maybe let's, and even we didn't talk about this, but there's people, process, technology, the classic PPT. Maybe let's start on the people side, if you don't mind, of kind of how, when you came to Pure, how you started to dive in from the people aspect.
Yeah. So I came in April 2021. So we are still shut down, right? So our founder calls. He's always at the office, no matter what's going on. He's like here at 6 a.m. and he leaves at midnight. So very, very, very hardworking gentleman. So I came in and he said, "Hey, we got to look at FA and FB." And I thought FA meant failure analysis and FB meant Facebook. I said, "Okay, sure."
I remember when I joined Pure, FB felt Facebook. For folks out there internally, that means Flashblade, but hey.
So that's how much I knew about what Pure does. And he said, "Okay, we gotta make sure." I knew what we were trying to achieve, essentially, harden the security posture of our products. So so the first thing I did was this is not only a technology challenge, it is also an organizational and a process challenge. Like I said, 2,000 engineers across multiple geos, multiple business units, multiple product lines, different technology stacks. So how do you can't, and you can't have a central organization. Some securities are under the CISO or somewhere saying thou shalt do this, and give me a team of 50 people, and I'll be the arbiter of security design and processes. So that would never work. You can't do it. So I said, okay, the way this is going to work is I will work from the top and the bottom. So I talked to all the architects and team leads and various business units. I talked to all the general managers, the VPs of engineering, the product managers from top down. Worked very closely with our chief product officer Ajay and our CTOs, and sort of said, and everybody had lots of issues with security, right? And different perspective of what it meant. Somebody said, yeah, we patch open source software, so we should be okay. And then somebody said, yeah, we have this compliance thing that happens, in the end, and so we should be okay. So the idea was to bring in the vernacular, saying, how do we do this so that you're doing the SDLC, meaning building security into everything that you do. And I will, remove the mystery of the security vernacular and translate it into actual practices that you will follow. And the ask was to enhance the PLC. So Pure and many organizations have a PLC and an army of TPMs that follow that PLC, and they have to enforce various gates and checkpoints. And so what I did was we said, and the good thing is that large organizations and engineering organizations are process driven. So if you are able to influence the process,
for better and worse, but it can be for better. Yeah.
So process can be, it's a double-edged sword. It can get in the way, or if you learn how to harness it, then it becomes the norm, the new normal. So then I said, okay, and we all understand the line at the top, which is your classical development life cycle. On the right-hand side, we have cloud ops and SecOps. So the appliances will go out the door after you've tested them. And then we have a large cloud footprint. We are delivering services and a lot more services as time goes by from our cloud. So that has to be secured as well. So that's where I brought in these security practices, and it starts by having a training program. So engineers can get educated on security technologies and approaches. Introduce threat modeling in the early requirements and design phase, hardening over operating systems and containers and EC2 environments and Kubernetes. So there are standards called the CIS benchmarks, which is the practitioner's guide to the NIST philosophical documents. So originally we were following NIST documents and they leave everything to interpretation. So we were getting nowhere. I said, no, let's shift to the CIS benchmarks and you follow those. They're very prescriptive. You do these 200 things and your operating system is hardened. So we brought in those concept scanning tools. So we were using something like Black Duck sparingly, and then we said, no, well, let's pick the right tools that will give us what we need across the code bases and make it part of the CI/CD, make it part of the automation that we have to build and compile things. Put together open source governance and PCERT mechanisms that will watch out for announcements that happen in the open source world and make sure we are able to respond to them. The next log4j comes along, we have mechanisms to deal with it. One of the biggest problems is secrets. So your passwords and keys, they're sort of left all over the place. They're hard-coded in the code, they're left on the systems, and we wanted to put together a comprehensive program we can scan for those and remediate and don't leave any secrets lying around. Use key stores, things like that. And then build security test cases that will test out things that we may have found during threat modeling of the design. And then as we get into the right-hand side, now we're talking about the cloud, and that's where we want to bring in, although it says the NIST 800 compliance for the cloud, we are now translating it to the CIS benchmarks and hardening out the AWS environment itself, bring in cloud security posture management, a comprehensive set of north, south, and east-west security controls, pen testing of the cloud periodically, and then feeding all that back into the system. So these are the practices. Then I said, okay, we will now enhance our PLC to bring in these practices. Of course, it'll lengthen things. And that's where it was important to get the buy-in from the executive team, because their revenue is at stake. Things take longer, things have to shift out. So we did this iteratively and then slowly made it part of the natural process. And you can see organizationally, this is a compressed view organization, but we have a huge organization spread out from everywhere from the field guys all the way to developers and testers and cloud guys and cloud ops and the systems organization. So I worked. So the first 60 days I did 100 plus Zoom calls to explain this picture to everybody, so they're ready for the next step.
Building consensus is, and especially I think about the top up and the bottom down, like organizational change has to have top level sponsorship and awareness and understanding. But when it's pushed down from the top only, it almost never goes well, whether it's security or other stuff. People, and actually sometimes it's even just identifying the people who are the various folks have been there for a while. They know everybody. They're subject matter experts, whether or not, I mean, at Pure, a lot of the general title is member of technical staff. It's often that way in Silicon Valley kind of thing. So it's not apparent in the org chart. You have to kind of become a student of the organization to see, not like power centers in a political way, but the people who have done really great work and everyone respects them and follows their leads. So good for you.
Exactly. So then, eventually, and as we walk through this, in the next set of this, we'll see. Now, what I was really impressed and surprised was that Pure as an organization wanted to embrace security. It was, there was not like, oh, we don't want to do this. They were like, no, we want to do this. We'll spend money on this if we have to, and we'll make the sacrifices and reorganize if we have to. But we want to become secure. So I was really impressed with that. So that comes from our board, and I presented to our board. Our board is very conscious about security. So it is true. Security is a board level discussion every time.
Not just at our Pure's customers, but at Pure as well. So let me do one brief side note, because we're literally just about to get to the 6-point plan, and then we may go a little bit past the 45-minute mark, but I'm not seeing a lot in the Q&A, so I think we're fine. For those who are wondering about NIST, and we did actually put that into the description here. One thing I wanted to highlight, so there's the NIST 5-point framework: prevent, identify, response, remediation, business continuity there. This in general is a little bit more of a how you would use what you would use from a you are responding to a security event or you're trying to prevent it, et cetera. It doesn't apply in some ways quite as much to how you would actually build products. And actually, we do have internal to Pure, the sets of capabilities we make available to customers, and we actually break it down. I intentionally took things out of this slide so it wouldn't just be a total eye chart, but there's a version of this slide that even has some confidential internal information where we actually break down all the things that we do and offer to customers and capabilities, alignment to NIST. So we're happy to have that discussion with you. The DevSecOps discussion is more of how do we build the products to be secure, not the security capabilities necessarily that we offer to customers. So I wanted to kind of highlight that. And actually, then I think from there, that takes us directly into, you've mentioned the 6-point plan. There is some stuff. And if anyone would like the super long version of this, we actually have at Retinder, you've co-authored a couple different blog posts. Like this was one of them. It was around how to implement threat modeling. And if anyone can see the scroll bar here, it's kind of long. I turned this into a PDF, and it actually feels long enough to feel like a paper. That's good, right? That's a good thing. You want this stuff to be that long, and you want tables that make your eyes hurt a little bit, kind of thing. But to your point, it needs to be simplified down enough for folks to keep in their head and follow it. To kind of bring this section to a close, you might kind of walking through how you boiled so much of that into an kind of an actionable, comprehensible plan.
Yeah, exactly. So now came the fun part. So great. We got the concept. We understand the theory of it. We understand the benefits of it. What does it mean for the 2,000 plus engineers that we have? And so I said, okay, this will be called the 6-point plan, and it is actually a distillation of the many standards out there, and the secure coding methodologies and various frameworks. And I'll talk about why training is at 4. So when I came in, one of our capabilities called EMS and CDU and some of these very high value and potentially high risk services were being designed and about to launch. So that became the first candidate because it involved both our cloud business unit as well as the appliances, because you're affecting orchestrating things on the appliance. So and threat modeling was a completely foreign concept. Threat modeling is a foreign concept to. I came from McAfee, right? And McAfee guys couldn't do threat modeling, but their problem was everybody's an expert, so they could never agree on, what's a threat or not, and nobody wanted to be told that you have a flaw in there. So they'd never have a successful threat modeling session because of too many experts. But in our case, we adopted a methodology called STRIDE, and that blog that Jason that Andrew was sharing earlier goes into depth on what is STRIDE. And there are a couple of approaches to threat modeling. One is that you can sort of theorize how somebody can attack you, and people do that. They'll do these red teaming type sessions and say, oh, if I come in this way, if I do that way, and that problem, if the system is small enough, yes, you can do that. But as the systems become larger and larger, and you're trying to outguess attackers that are many times smarter than
all over the world.
Yeah. So our developers are experts in storage, whatever functionality they're building, and it becomes very difficult to outguess some attackers. So the threat modeling approach is the other way around. It says, I will follow best practices so I don't leave vulnerabilities in there. So STRIDE highlights the key types of vulnerabilities, for example, spoofing, a fake system talking to the real system, things like that. Denial of service is the D part, ease escalation of privileges, and so forth. So what it does is it says, let's design it so these common vulnerability patterns don't show up in the design itself. And now there's lots of books out there on STRIDE and things like that, but our designs are peculiar to us. So we literally, during the first session, we said, who's the actor on the outside, and what's the first thing on the pure storage cloud side on this side, and we just said, okay, here's the boundary, and we will do the stride session at this level. So that's simplified. Now all of a sudden it was okay. I get it. There's a operator or somebody using our API or the web interface on this side, and we have our security gateway on this side, and I can see how spoofing might happen, or somebody might do a denial of service flooding attack on us. And all of a sudden it clicked, right? And now, so basically taught them how to decompose the design and find security boundaries of trust. And on that, trust nothing. And now analyze, if this site is bad and it's doing one of those 5 things, how would you protect yourself against it? Because these attacks are so sophisticated, they will find one vulnerability, jump to another one, and then something happens. So that's the methodology we did, and I ran those sessions earlier on myself. And I didn't, because I didn't understand the designs, because I'm coming from outside, but I would just give them the question, and the teams were really smart, where they could then draw the threads out and figure out all the issues, and pretty soon it became fun for them because they were discovering how they could do designs better. So then I published a paper inside here saying, security hardened designs and how you should do that. And then each business unit took that and turned it into a practice that fits their patterns. And now it is so pervasive. Our teams are doing, each business unit is doing anywhere from 50 to 100 design sessions, threat modeling sessions a year. Every team asks that question very first, saying, okay, you just gave me the requirement, building a new feature. Am I supposed to do a threat model on this? And what's my template to do so? And it's become a fun part of the design itself. So that's how we got threat modeling instantiated, and which is a very hard topic to get into a practice. Then we did a whole bunch of POCs and found the right scanning tools. The business unit did a great job of automating scans. So we are many places we are 100% code scan all the time. The configurations that we run on our build systems and repositories and the infrastructure started getting hardening. So organizationally, this is challenging because we have our development organization, and then we have the IT ops or cloud ops, right? And then we have security ops. And I always said, hey, this is our challenge because things will fall through the cracks as we go from this side to that side. The other side, people won't understand what were you asking me? You asked me to give you a S3 bucket, and I gave you an S3 bucket. What's your problem? Well, you didn't secure it. And so we got into the habit of saying,
his job.
The providers saying, I will give you a secure system, and the acceptors saying, tell me what assurances you're giving me on the security posture of what you're giving me, right? So that
prove it to me politely.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Have you followed the benchmark? So slowly the configuration hardening became part of it. So training, you'll say, why is training 4 and not 0? And the reason being, things are in flight, right? Things are happening, and we will bring in none of this actually happened serially, but what I forgot to mention was that each of these 6 points then has a maturity level. And the maturity level definitions at the beginning, I defined what they were, but then we have now done another shift left of that and said each BU defines the maturity level of what they will achieve in these 6 points. Because every BU, like I said, has a different pace, different technology stack. So this way we managed to kind of decentralize the entire process. So the framework exists and everybody follows it, and then they modulate what goes into their next maturity level based on what their priorities are, needs are, and resources are. Point 5, infrastructure hardening. So this is where we mandated all cloud footprints go through the CS benchmarks. There's cloud security posture management capabilities, a full suite. So number 6 is, so once you harden your design and your infrastructure is hardened, now you have to run it and deploy it in a secure fashion. This is where all the security controls come in. And now if you look at the AWS security control, there's 50 security controls, everything from the DDoS and botnet protection on the outside all the way to some very advanced agents and capabilities on the inside and protecting Kubernetes and a huge list of things. So I simplified that to saying, here is our cloud control security matrix, and you will not go live till you have checked off the presence of these security controls, firewall being a simple example. API security came in, web app firewall came in. So, and pretty soon we'll be going into service mesh security, zero trust network ACLs, mutual trust, TLS everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then SecOps, which is under our sisters organization, is the eyes and ears on our cloud deployment. So normally, so that's a third department, and nobody would tell them that, hey, we are going live in cloud in Pure One with some service, and they'd be like, never told me about it. So what am I supposed to do? So now we have a formal checkoff. They have a seat on the exit, release exit stage to say, yes, we have the security controls in place. We have the ability to handle alerts, and we have a playbook to deal with it. And only then can you go live in the cloud. So this enforced this discipline across from you thought about it to now you've actually shipped it and deployed it and all the security things you have to do. And it just became part of the process. And now it's an autopilot to some degree. We now have, so whereas me and the CISO were, I was operational in this to begin with, and now I have a governance role, which says, PMs change, there's constantly new teams come in. So we want to make sure that they are all educated on this process. So last thing we want is DPM comes as, I've never heard of the 6-point plan. What is it? Yeah, and fall off. So that's the governance aspect of it. So I would, so I would now have a layer on top, which is the governance of the 6-point plan, and that's where I focus on.
Awesome, thank you. One thing even that maybe think of that, I've been reading the book Build by Tony Fadell, created the iPod and the iPhone and other stuff. And one thing he talked about at one point is that if you're not thinking about some other team, they're not thinking about you. So if you go to them later in the process, they haven't been thinking about your stuff at all. If you haven't been thinking about pulling them, and for him, it was a lesson learned when he went to a go-to-market thing. Like he designed this great product, and then there was nowhere to put it on the shelves. I think we are running up to the end here. I'm going to do a quick end on the poll, and then I'll share this back out for folks that are curious. Do you look at DevSecOps when evaluating products? 60%. Always fascinating to see these. And then evaluating vendors, how important is their approach? Critical. Some are medium, and then some it's lower. Some folks are going to put it in the chat. And Olivia, if you don't mind launching the last poll here, which is there we go. Now, this is a little bit of a grab bag of stuff that we're just curious to ask. Are signed images important to you? We haven't talked about what that is. So if you do know what it is, great. It's a hot topic during a recent discussion. Gen AI, are you using it at work? Are you looking at, because there's a whole aspect of security around this. Also, it's also where a whole section of your brain is going to these days. I know we're Tinder, and then even a little bit of an intersection of AI and ML on your ability to protect data. Because we are not super tight on time, this was always meant to be a bonus item. Could I impose on you for the last item here? Because we think about science, the software development side, but there's also physical supply chain security. You mind giving kind of a minute or so about how we think about physical supply chain security?
Absolutely. So besides open source packages and things like that, we build hardware, and that has a supply chain that obviously spans the globe. So we have a assurance team. So on the software side, we are now instituting an SBOM management system. So we have a complete picture of the bill of material, the software bill of material that is in our environments, and that's queryable. And you can say, hey, this one just came out. What's the impact to us? Our P-Cert is now getting armed to be able to answer those questions in automated fashion. There's talk about us exposing that interface out to our customers, so they can then themselves query saying, in my build that I have 5.2 for FA, whatever, this vulnerability just got announced. Do I have an impact? Right. So that's really important to understand what's in your software. Our appliances are complicated. So we have fairly complex hardware, and that comes from a fairly complex supply chain that is sourced all over the world. So our manufacturing team engages third-party auditors to then do periodic, quarterly, or every 6-month assessment of our vendors, and we get those results and we evaluate those and see if there's any red flags. We want our vendors to treat our intellectual property in a certain way. We want them to certify what they're producing in a certain way. We will soon be instituting pen testing on, for example, we get a line card, right? Line card that processes of them, and we want to say, have you signed the firmware on that line card? And is the line card itself being subjected to stress testing and attacks over the network? So those are some of the things that so audits are mandatory. That's been part of our practice. And we are going to enhance that audit process to have more testing as well.
Thank you. I know that's super hard to summarize, so I appreciate it. And if you're listening and want more on that, and sometimes we see this sometimes from a security team, sometimes from a procurement team, but if you want a deeper dive on this, you're happy to, because it's worth, frankly, more time than we're giving it today, but at the same time didn't want to ignore this as a topic, because it will come up sometimes. With that, we are at time, amazingly. It always goes fast for Tinder. Thank you so much for the walkthrough, especially the depth. I intentionally just wanted to park on kind of the 6-point plan, just to let you kind of draw that out, because there's so much in there that hopefully, if you're not a developer, you have a better sense of some of what's involved, or you are, thinking about what you might do or in your organization about or upstream. If you did join, we'll have probably a minute or two left for Q&A. We'll see if those come in here. If you did join because you were thinking about the drawing, hey, that's cool. It is for the Ember 12-ounce travel mug, retail value of $130, the kind you can control with your phone. The winner is James M. from North Carolina. Thank you so much, James. And please make sure to join us next month for an Evergreen Dreams, meet migration realities, have some fun with the title. And I think what I'll do here is I'll for the last poll here, I'll go ahead and end that and share it back. We are officially done, folks. Feel free to hang around for a minute, just because we're Tinder. I want to make sure kind of any final words and thoughts from you, and then we may call it a wrap. But I wanted to give you last word, because I'm sure there's something you were thinking of. Man, I wanted to toss that in earlier. It always happens to me, at least. So final thoughts.
So just a couple of points. So one, the attackers are already using generative AI to craft attacks. So that's going to accelerate. And us as defenders should also be using it. And we've been training our teams to use it for threat modeling, to understand vulnerabilities, so we don't want to get left behind. So that's one. And second is demystify security. So if you are interested in security, it's always good to sort of take out the jargon and the vernacular and sort of simplify it to what a practitioner should be doing. And that creates adoption and less of a barrier. I know many organizations go the other way. They'll invent more acronyms and create the complexity to sort of say, hey, I need a big security department. And I'm saying, no, that's the wrong approach. That's why security is not forward properties. Simplify it.
Cool. Thank you so much. With that, I think we are at time. It is 1 minute before the hour. I think we were actually able to weave in some of the questions as we were going along the way. It actually kind of worked out organically. And just in case you really like the closing music, we'll pull that up here. I hope that you join us next month. Olivia put the link in the chat, November 15th. Thank you so much for joining us, from myself, from Tinder, from the entire Coffee Break team. I hope you have a good day, a good week, a good month. See you all next month. Thanks for Tinder.
All right. Thank you.